So, first story I want to talk about is the idea that this was not a war, and we'll get to the idea of whether this is a war in a second. But this is not a war that the United States would have taken completely under its own decision making, meaning that without outside forces and pressures, would the United States have engaged in this war, in this air campaign gone as far as it has, if it wasn't for the fact that Israel, as we have found out, was going to engage in this air campaign with or without the United States? That the United States was given the impression by Israeli authorities that the bombs are coming, they're going to drop, they're going to hit Iran, and they're going to hit Iran bigly. And so the United States can either be involved in this bigly operation or they cannot be involved in the bigly operation. And from that perspective, as Trump, a year after they had previously bombed the atomic weapons program and announced that it had been annihilated, with no signs that the Iranians were now going to stop pursuing said atomic weapons program, seemed to have signed on to the operation, gone along with the Israelis, and engaged in this campaign. Now, the reason why we know this is due to a statement from Marco Rubio. Let me read you his exact words. Again, he is one of the most influential presidential cabinet members since Henry Kissinger. In fact, he holds the same two positions Henry Kissinger did hold when he had the office, both the National Security Advisor position and the Secretary of State position. And Henry Kissinger said at the time that it was a bad idea. It was a bad idea to have those many responsibilities to a single individual. And since Henry Kissinger was in that position, the roles of both offices has greatly expanded. The amount of information that both offices take in from around the globe and have to process and have to, bring before the president and, make decisions off of their own, that is much, much larger. Anyway, he said, we knew that there was going to be an Israeli action. We knew that they would precipitate an attack against American forces, that would precipitate an attack against American forces. And we knew that if we didn't preemptively go after them before they launched those attacks, we would suffer higher casualties. The operation needed to happen because Iran, in about a year or a year and a half, would cross the line of immunity, meaning they would have so many short-range missiles, so many drones, that no one could do anything about it because they could hold the whole world hostage. Obviously, we were aware of Israeli intentions and understood what that would mean for us. We had to be prepared to act as a result of it, but this had to happen no matter what. So there's two things he's saying here, right? We'll start with the second thing before, of course, the main thing. The second thing is, regardless of whether or not Israel was going to get involved in this operation, regardless on whether or not Israel was going to go after the Ayatollah, was going to go after the ballistic missile program. Sorry, I have a slight cough. Go after the ballistic missile program, go after anything. Regardless, we should go after this because they're going to be expanding missile production and drone production to such a capacity that they're going to be able to threaten all of our assets in the region. The way that we're seeing drones slamming into buildings in Bahrain and the UAE right now, you'll see that 3 or 4 times more fold. Seems to be the warning that if we don't do this now, the capacity to produce these weapons will continue to expand, and then it will threaten our bases and our assets among the region. Now, to be clear, threatening our assets and actually being used against our assets are two totally different things, because the Iranians know if they were to take any military action against the United States in the region, you'd have to take it against American bases that are hosted, which means that if you wanted to go after an American base in Jordan, that you got to cross countries like Iraq to do it. Therefore, you could be intercepted in Iraq, you could be intercepted by the Jordanian Air Force, and you could be intercepted by the American Air Force. You could get the Jordanians involved, you could get the UAE involved, you could get Kuwait involved. And by the fact that this is not American sovereign land, this is not no Guantanamo Bay situation, this is not North Carolina, this is Syria, bitch. We don't have any bases in Syria, but this is Jordan. Like, if you bomb Jordan, Jordan's going to be mad. If you bomb Kuwait, Kuwait is going to be mad. So these countries, through these base sharing programs, have an inherent deterrent. They have a deterrent as we are the United States and no one wants to bomb an American base, usually due to the fact that we have a capacity to bomb whatever we want basically around the world through our extensive Nimitz class aircraft carrier program, the amount of air bases we have around the world, our extensive use of long range UAVs, strike aircraft, drones. You get the idea. And then you have to piss off the local government, which also has allies. So this would work as a disincentive. So the short range drones and the short range missiles and the longer range UAV strike drones, these are a problem. They would be a problem for American bases, but do they inherently meet the imminent threat required for the American president to take this type of unilateral action? No, he said it was a year and a half. There are people who sit on the Security Council, sit on these committees, the security committees, national security committees, where they can review this information, and they have not been informed in any capacity that there is an imminent threat.
This is a discussion that has not been had because he bypassed Congress. The accountability mechanism.
A president has the right to take military action for 60 days.
If there's an imminent threat, and there is no imminent threat. Let me
well,
be
that
really
might be
clear
your
about
opinion.
this. It's not my
your opinion.
I sit on the Armed Services and the Intelligence Committee. If there are imminent threats, they have an obligation to tell us about it. I have seen no imminent threat. And even people within the administration have denied that there's an imminent threat. So, listen.
So, it doesn't meet the standard of imminent threat, the fact that they're going to have a lot more long-range drones and short-range to medium, intermediate range missiles in a year and a half? No, it does not meet the standard that you can bypass Congress through that. Does the fact that they still have some sort of atomic weapons program bypass that threat? Is there a threat that their 60% enrichment was going to quickly get up to 80% and then be put on a warhead in the next month or two? That we had to strike right now, or they were going to put that on a warhead, and then it could threaten the United States. And before you know it, you have an atom cloud over Hawaii or over Guam or American bases. No, none of these meet these standards. So I do want to put out that whether or not they're trying to select their language with this in mind, the way that he phrases it here and the timelines that he gives makes it a lot harder to say that Congress has no say whatsoever and whether or not we're going to go to another country, blow up their most supreme and religious figure in the entire country, and then start bombing everything else, getting retaliatory strikes that strand American citizens in tourist destinations, as well as killing American soldiers. By the way, I do want to throw out there, we now know that the presidential administration had no evacuation plan. Zero, none, nada, for civilians in the UAE, Bahrain, Dubai, and Kuwait. Like, there was no evacuation plan. And the reason that Trump gave and the administration gave for the fact they had no evacuation plan for American citizens in the region that could be targeted. And think about this. It's not just a question about targeting American bases. If the Iranians really wanted to, there are hotels full of American tourists. And that is a real threat you need to consider. Is that more likely than targeting American bases? No, there's a more military logic in going after the bases. Of course, going after civilians can precipitate a different type of response from the American public, who is wary of this conflict at this point, I would say. Definitely at this early stage, as we're starting to take American casualties in the Middle East that we're really spiking in the amount of casualties we've taken in the Middle East for quite some time, in a presidency that said we were going to go away from this. But there was no evacuation plan. Zero. And they didn't have an evacuation plan because, and I quote, they weren't expecting the retaliation to be that quick. You kill the supreme religious and authority figure in a country, and then you don't have a plan for if they retaliate quickly. This is why you want congressional overview. This is why you want them to have overview and oversight of this, so they can think these things through. Like, I wonder if we were to blow up the supreme leader of a country, could that mean we might need to evacuate our residents? I mean, if you're in Congress and you think like, hey, I think 30 of my constituents are in Kuwait, doesn't that concern you? Doesn't that matter to you? Is that not your issue? Is to protect Americans both at home and abroad? I mean, there's a Democrat and Republicans Abroad program for a reason. Either way, this seemed to suggest both A, an undermining of the idea that Congress did not need to be involved in this process, but also B, that if there wasn't, and this is the main point, if there wasn't an Israeli campaign to go after the Iranians, then the Trump administration might not have felt so compelled to get engaged in the operation, because in their words, if the Israelis hit them, then the Iranians are going to hit us. So we should hit them before they hit us. And so that's how they got into the logic of saying this was a preemptive operation. But it's only a preemptive operation if you were to say, we stand back, we don't do anything after Israel bombs them, and then Iran bombs us, despite a lack of participation, because they see Israel as, working as an extension of the United States. Still, this is very interesting to say that maybe this wouldn't have been happening in the first place if it wasn't for Israel engaging in the campaign, or they're feeling that because Israel did it, we had to do it. There was also a follow-up with Netanyahu where he was asked about there, where, hey, you dragged Trump into this. And he responds, no, that's impossible, because Trump is so strong.
A lifetime worth of study, in my view. And I want to ask you this, there are people that...
Oh, can I also just ask, why is it that we have the president of Israel on American television, American primetime TV? I mean, the Fox News slot, that was primetime, used to go to Tucker, and now goes to Sean Hannity. Why is it we have him explaining the war where American soldiers are dying, schools are getting blown up? It's, it's very terrible, very horrific. And the person that's explaining it to the American public, the person who's justifying the operations and saying why we have to do it, is not the American president, it's the president of Israel.
A lifetime worth of study, in my view. And I want to ask you this, there are people that say, well, the Prime Minister of Israel dragged Donald Trump into it. And as somebody that's been friends with him over 30 years, nobody drags Donald Trump into anything, number one, but I want to get your reaction to that.
Well, you're right. I mean, that's ridiculous. Donald Trump is the strongest leader in the world. He does what he thinks is right for America. He does also what he thinks is right for future generations. And frankly, we're partners in that effort, because I've devoted my life to securing the life of the one and only Jewish state. And believe me, it's been a struggle. I've known the pangs of war. I lost a brother in war and in battle. I myself fought terrorists and was wounded in liberating hostages from a hijacked plane. I held a fellow soldier in my arms when I was 18, and he died in my arms. I know the cost of war, but I know sometimes that war is necessary to protect us from the people who would destroy us. And that's what free societies have to understand.
Now, there's been a lot of speculation as to why Israel has such an effective air defense system. I mean, if you watch Tel Aviv, some missiles have gotten through, but largely speaking, they've been able to stop the majority of projectiles, definitely in comparison to Iranian air defense, which has not had the best record as of late, when the majority of footage I'm seeing of Iranian air defense is like this. It's not of it working, it's of it exploding. But the reason why is because the Iron Dome is actually multiple layers of systems. It's not one system. It's multiple different types of rockets that try to attack projectiles going at Israel at different stages. And because they have like a part that goes after, just the shorter range rockets that you would get from Hezbollah and from the Strip. And then you have other rockets that would go more after like ballistic missile targets. And then you have the most effective part of the system, which is Netanyahu's big fucking echolocating ears, which could hear immediately when the Iranians launch anything at them. Immediately. One of the most effective systems they have. But if you listen to this speech, what's interesting about this is, number one, the question was, did you drag him into it? And he said, no, because he's too strong. He's too strong. But if you listen to Marco Rubio, they say that Israel going into it meant that we could be a target for potential retaliation. So we kind of felt like we had to go in, because if we didn't, then our bases would be at risk. So essentially, whether you want to call it dragging, whether you want to call it they changed the pressure differential in the room, so there's more pressure upon the United States to act through the threat of retaliation, whether you want to add the whatever diplomatic speak you want to make it more palatable to AIPAC or whoever you want to hear those words that makes you nervous. The idea that Israel taking this military operation due to being so integrated with the United States and its CENTCOM command and working with us and such a close American ally, when they take actions, that often means we can get brought into conflicts. And we can either choose to not be part of it, but we have to make a statement to not be part of it, or we can choose to go along with it. In this case, it seems like we chose to go along with it to the sound of over 1,000 bombs being dropped on the Iranians. That was as of like a day or two ago. That number is at this point higher. I also want to say, listen to what he says at the end of this, because I do have to pivot into something else.
We're partners in that effort because I've devoted my life to securing the life of the one and only Jewish state. And believe me, it's been a struggle. I've known the pangs of war. I lost a brother in war and in battle. I myself fought terrorists and was wounded in liberating hostages from a hijacked plane. I held a fellow soldier in my arms when I was 18, and he died in my arms. I know the cost of war, but I know sometimes that war is necessary to protect us from the people who would destroy us.
War is necessary sometimes. Sometimes war is necessary. It sounds like he's calling this a war, which does not align with what the administration was trying to say is currently going on. If you were to go and read the White House page, if you were to go read their official presser that they've been, trying to get the public to go with, here it is. Here's the official party line on the war. This past weekend, President Trump made the decision to launch Operation Epic Fury, major combat operations against the Iranian regime. The objectives are clear: destroy their missiles and raise their missile industry to the ground, annihilate their navy, ensure the terrorist regime's proxies can no longer destabilize the region, ensure that Iran can never obtain a nuclear weapon. As a byproduct of Operation Epic Fury's success, 49 of the most senior Iranian leaders, including Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, have already been wiped off the face of the earth in the opening strikes. Bottom line, President Trump should be commended for killing terrorists and finally having the courage to do what American presidents for nearly 50 years have all contemplated, but failed to execute. The rogue Iranian regime, under the evil hand of the Ayatollah, has killed and maimed thousands of U.S. soldiers over the years. They have helped train, supply, and guide militant groups and terrorist groups that have fought the United States in the Middle East for years. Their brutal attacks and threats will end under President Donald J. Trump. America will win. The terrorist Iranian regime will be defeated. Q&A. Is the U.S. at war with Iran? Answer. The president announced major combat operations against Iran with clear achievable goals: destroy their missiles, annihilate their navy. So the answer is, it is not a war. It is a major combat operation. A major combat operation. Does it feel like a major combat operation? Now look, does this sound eerily similar to the Russian special military operation when they announced the start of their war, of the major expansion of the invasion of Ukraine, in the 2022 invasion? Does this remind me of that? Absolutely. Is it the same? Yeah. Yes. Yeah, it's the same. It's the exact same. It's not different at all, really. People will try to pretend it's different. It isn't different. The type of war is different. There's a difference between a full-scale ground invasion and a air war, but they're both still a war. And the way language is being used is in order to try to dilute the message of the fact that, yeah, the United States is at war, and American citizens and American military personnel within range of Iranian drones and missiles are at risk. And North American Command, is at high alert. If American soldiers are being told not to wear their uniform outside of their base, that seems to suggest that there is a level of readiness they want to be prepared for attacks even on the soil of the United States as they go after the government. It is still a war. And by calling it a major combat operation, it's not that it isn't a major combat operation, just like the invasion of Ukraine wasn't. It could have been, considered a special military operation, but that doesn't make them not wars. They're still wars. They're just different types of wars. The invasion of Grenada was a short but quick war. Like that is still a war. If American soldiers can die, they're getting in harm's way. And this is not something that's like quick and it's 24 hours, 48, 72 hours. Part of the argument from the Russians for it being a special military operation was it's going to be quick, it's going to be simple. And so before anybody can figure out what really the legalese of any of this is, it'll be over, right? You're trying to outrace the critics. But the problem was they couldn't outrace the critics, and they got bogged down, and the Ukrainians seemed to have a lot more fight in them than they thought. And so that quickness, it didn't work. And so now the longer it's going on, everybody in Russia knows it's a war. It's just kind of tabooed and, discussed it kind of in those terms. In this case, at this point, we know the war is probably going to last for weeks. Unless there's going to be a ground component, it'll probably be coming to some conclusion after some weeks. If it goes longer than that, then the likelihood of an energy crisis continues to escalate. Right now, we've already seen the amount for crude in the barrel go up to about, I think the last I saw it was $83 a barrel, but I haven't checked in the last 24 hours, so maybe it's different. But in a few weeks, being past $100 a barrel is not hard to believe. And so, that might bring the war to a conclusion without regime change. There might be regime change, but an air war is still war. 6 Americans are dead. Many dozens more wounded. Others throughout other Gulf states are dead and wounded. Israelis are dead and wounded. Many Iranians are dead and wounded, like over 500, probably more than in the 600, 700 range at this point. Because the last time I saw it was 555, and that was like 24 to 36 hours ago. So yes, it is the same. Special military operation, fucking major combat operation. The thing that's the same isn't the style of war, how the war is conducted. They're both wars, and the way language is being used is to sell the war to the public. You don't want to call it a war because war has connotations like, oh shit, your kid could die. Oh snap, that could mean it's going to cost a lot of money. Wars cost a lot of money. There's casualties on both sides usually, even if one side's taking a lot more than the others, usually casualties on both sides. It could be dangerous. There's all these connotations that come with that in comparison to a fast and quick major combat operation, which, what does that mean? That could mean anything. That could mean a raid to kill somebody like Osama bin Laden, and that could mean multiple week slog. Either way, it's a war, and the way language is being used is to dilute and sell the fact that it is a war in a nicer way. He's trying to say it's not a war, it's something else. But it is a war. It's definitely a war. If the Chinese bombed Hawaii tomorrow and killed like 555 people, would that be a war? Are the Iranians at war and we're not at war? Because I think the Iranians definitely think they're at war, but is the United States at war? Can one be at war and the other can't? That doesn't make much sense. We're at war. And I would prefer if politicians were more honest. Like, this is going to be a quick war. We believe there will not be many casualties, and it is worth the risk for these reasons. That's more honest, okay? This isn't a war. It's a combat operation. This has the type of sliminess that the branding of the special military operation had, which is we can't have an honest conversation with the public about what's happening. If anybody else has an authority to stop this, it seems that one person can make the decision to do this. Nobody else can really seems to stop it. And, you just kind of have to deal with it. Sucks. 1 second, I'm getting a call. It was just my uncle just calling to wish me happy birthday. It's my birthday. I didn't mention it today. I didn't think it was super important. The war going on after all. Where were we? Oh yes, we were talking about the language of whether or not it's a war. I wanted to show some of the contradictions of the administration, because when I'm saying it's a war, it's like immediately, it's anyone's logic. It's like, yeah, we're bombing stuff. If they were bombing us, it'd be a war. American soldiers are dying. American soldiers are getting wounded. Other soldiers are getting wounded and dying. Like a school got blown up, right? I mean, like, what are these people dying for? If they're not dying for something, they're not, if they're not, it's not a war. What are they? What is a very out of control police operate? Like, what would you call this? Of course it's a war. And if you listened to the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, yesterday, he said, we didn't start this war, but under President Trump, we are finishing it. Then after that, today, all of a sudden, he's saying it isn't a war. Never mind, it's not a war. Now, this could be for two reasons. Number one, the PR reason. War is not as palatable as combat operation. Invasion is not as palatable as special military operation. It's just politicians trying to sell military action that could lead to the loss of life after having insufficient conversations with the public for the reasons we're engaging in this in the first place, where I don't even know if the leaders all involved entirely know why they're engaging in it in the first place. They have to sell it. The other thing is there's legal consequences where if this is a war and this is not a action that had to be taken in immediacy for the protection of the United States as an extension of the AOMF, oh boy. But I think one of the clearest examples of this divide and how to talk to the public about whether or not it's a war is the difference between the administration officials talking about it yesterday and at certain points today and other officials who are trying to adhere to the White House's guidelines on what to call this. You can see people kind of immoral, like fighting their basic logic.
Corrupt, bankrupt man.
Hey, Castrix, Defiance, thank you for the primer.
And we may have casualties. That often happens in war.
I don't know if this is technically a war.
We didn't start this war, but under President Trump, we are finishing it.
This isn't a war. We haven't declared war.
The Secretary of Defense, who calls himself the Secretary of War, said today this is a war.
We set the terms of this war from start to finish.
Nobody should classify this as war. It is combat operations.
War is hell and always will be.
Strategic strikes are not war.
What is it? What is it? Is it a war? Is it not a war? They don't know. They don't know. They didn't know until they figured out there could be legal reasons that calling it what it is could be a problem for the chief executive. And once they realized war is not a popular brand, it's not like Pepsi, Coke, or whatever. It's not Gucci, okay? It's quite not like it's not liked at all. It's not beloved. It's much more of more like EA or Blizzard maybe.